Our girl is destitute.
What conspiracy theory do you have?
You're the Feyre.
I'm Feyre. He hates Tamlin. He's also a bit of a petty bitch.
And yet, she decides, let me just shoot my shot and see it. I'm like, girl.
Hey, babies.
Hello.
Welcome to the spoiler section for chapters 4 through 6 / the entire ACOTAR series. We'll try to keep it to just ACOTAR. Ariel, you have some disclaimers for us here?
Oh, I have a big one. I've already warned you, and I'm going to warn everyone else. I'm going to be ranting in this episode because boy, do I have thoughts on Tam Tam. I don't think it's going to be one rant. I think it's going to be rants throughout as we go through the chapters. And I'm just going to, I think I'm self-aware enough to realize I think rereading this shit about Tamlin just triggered me is what happened. I alluded to in the first episode a very shitty relationship I was in with a Tamlin of my own. Not David, obviously. Unfortunately, he just looks kind of like Tamlin, which, hey, that's the one good part about that guy.
Yeah.
So if you're a Tamlin girly, I am so sorry, but you're not going to like this.
Yeah. I feel like that's almost a good warning for if you're a Tamlin girly, like at all, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to like our podcast.
Yeah, and here's what I'll say is like we still welcome you with open arms.
Yeah.
And actually I would encourage you to listen because I'm going to make some assumptions here. I don't know these people, like I could be totally off base here, but I've gotten the feeling based on what I have seen is that people who love Tamlin haven't reread the series. I really, and obviously we're generalizing here.
Yeah.
There obviously are some who have. And I do kind of wonder, and I relate to this personally, if people who still stand Tamlin by the time they've read through the entire series, if there's almost like an embarrassment of like not having picked up on the red flags, to which I will say that's super valid. And I remember getting to Mist and Fury and starting to hate Tamlin and being like, oh my God, why didn't I pick up on the red flags in Thorns and Roses? What does that say about me? And then I realized something very important. It's designed that way.
Yep.
You're not supposed to pick up on the red flags during the first read.
No.
And I think I'm going to take it a step further. I think this is why, or one of the reasons why, ACOTAR is Sarah J. Maas's only first-person narrative series. Because we're in Feyre's head. Therefore, because she's not picking up on the red flags, we aren't either. And so if you are feeling that embarrassment, which I think we all, to a degree, do feel that.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you're one of, like, the weirdos, and I say that with love, who, like, did pick up on the red flags, which, like, hats off to you. Like,
I mean, Jesus. Okay.
You're amazing. Most of us did not, though. And it's because it's written that way.
Yep.
We're not supposed to. So don't feel embarrassed. All you did was read the book the way it was intended to be read.
And ACOTAR, I mean, I kind of said it, I think, at the very end of the spoiler-free. ACOTAR is 100% a fairy tale. Like, that is the style of the first one. You're entirely in this, like, fantasy land, which she, like, sweeps you into that fairy tale style, like, very well. And it's why there's a lot of shit that you, like, excuse because you're sort of just like, no, he's just, like, this complicated leader and he just doesn't, you know, he has anger issues and like, nah. I mean, like even kind of the problematic thing that I mentioned at the end of the last episode of like, when you see that he has control issues, you're like, partially you're like, it's fucking hot. And then on the other end, you're like, it's fucking scary. Like it's a total fairy tale. You just get swept up into the whole thing. And it's 100% designed that way. And I think in a weird way, it kind of does this like really interesting bonding thing amongst all the readers is that it's like, you're all kind of like, oh shit. Yeah. Remember, like, remember when we were there? And like, I remember even warning you about the reread of like the reread is really hard when you already know what happens with Tam, when you already know what happens with Rhys. Like, it's really hard because you're just kind of like, fuck. Because, of course, it's easier to see the red flags in someone when you're reading them as a villain.
Yes.
When you come back and reread ACOTAR, you are reading Tamlin as a bad guy. So, like, you're immediately looking for... It pops out at you a lot more. It kind of slaps you in the face in certain moments. So like for those of you who are doing a reread with us, like buckle up, Buttercup, because it kind of only gets worse, unfortunately, in this first book. Like I remember when I did the reread, I actually ended up skipping portions of ACOTAR and just going straight to Under the Mountain because I was just like, I can't go through this whole process of like falling. I was so fresh and I was just like, nope, can't do it. So like, it's gonna get rough.
Yeah. And I think that's you hit the nail on the head of like why I rage so much rereading these 3 chapters. Like it feels very much like looking back on like if you've ever been in a toxic relationship, looking back on it for the first time and going like, oh my God, like there was this and there was that and there was that. And it brings up a lot. And so oh boy, I have a lot to say. Before we get into it, I want to establish a few facts first because this is going to play into my rants, okay? So I want us to remember the 7x7 curse, okay? And all the 7x7 curse entails. We're gonna break it down. So we're gonna find out once we actually get to the 7x7 curse in Thorns and Roses, but from what I could find on the internet and from what I remember from reading it the first time, this is what the 7x7 curse entails. It's a 49-year-old curse that was specifically put on Tamlin, very Beauty and the Beast, as we know. And it says that he has 49 years to find a human woman, to kill a Fae, have hatred in her heart, and then make her fall in love with him.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is whom the curse, if he manages to do that, who the curse frees, okay? And from what I remember and from what I could find on the internet, the only people it frees is everyone in the Spring Court, and it frees them specifically from their masks. Now, from what I remember, the only people wearing masks were the people at that ball that happened under the mountain like 49 years ago.
Right.
Meaning it's really only Tamlin and his friends and some servants, or I guess all the servants, who live with Tamlin. None of the villagers in the Spring Court were at that ball. Okay? To which I say, who is Tamlin saving? And then the big hullabaloo of like who it really comes down to, who's being saved, should he break this curse, is him. Because the other part of this curse is if he does not break it, he has to marry Amarantha.
Yeah.
Okay? So I want us to all bear that in mind as we go through these chapters.
Holy shit.
Because this is my point, is the only person he's really freeing, because yes, the masks, that sucks, but they're not deadly. Their powers are dampened, I will say, but so is everyone else's, right? The only person Tamlin's really freeing is himself, okay? None of the High Lords under that mountain, or anyone under that mountain, none of them are getting freed. The only reason they're freed is because Tamlin kills Amarantha. But if it were to just be he broke the curse by Amarantha's rules, none of those people would be freed.
Really?
I'm like pretty positive.
It has nothing to do with anyone under the mountain. It's entirely the Spring Court, and then only the people who were at
the ball. Well, I checked the Reddit. I did some Google searches. From what I remember and from what I found online, it's only that.
Well, okay, and there's also sort of this idea. Okay, side note, people. Part of, I think I might have mentioned this in the very, very first episode we recorded, but part of my role in Ariel's life is playing devil's advocate. Yes. And it's like really hard for me to not. So I have
She's both the angel and the devil on my shoulder.
Yeah. So I have this, I've been prepping of like realizing that I like may end up being like defending Tamlin in this episode. So let's just jump on. We'll see how this ride goes. But my first devil's advocate moment is it wouldn't be a great thing for him to marry Amarantha, not only for Tamlin, but for like the realm, like for Prithian, because like then isn't it kind of the thing that they'd sort of be like the ultimate sort of like high lord and lady, like there's all these kind of like gnarly creatures that are like coming out more because of Amarantha, like the bog and like all these different things. So it's not, it also is this idea of like, we don't want her in more power.
Sure, but here's my counter argument. If someone has to marry Amarantha, wouldn't you want it to be a good guy who might be able to stop her from doing some of that bad shit?
Well, you know what's really crazy is like when you said that all he would really need to do is like marry her, my first thought was Rhys would have immediately married her.
Precisely.
Like what would Rhys have done? Rhys would have just married her and just like
Rhys is we're gonna get to Rhys's role in this. Actually, you know what? Let's just fucking do it now. Rhys was a sex slave for 49 years to prevent his friends and his people from not only getting discovered, but getting slaughtered.
Yeah.
Rhys sacrifices himself. What does Tamlin do? He sends his friends one by one out into the human world to get killed so that he doesn't have to marry Amarantha. I'm sorry. Like, that is indefensible. Especially, like, I wasn't even going to compare it to Rhys, but because it got brought up.
okay.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, it just, to me, so, and actually, this perfectly segues into my first point. Chapter 1, him screaming, murderers, like, twice, I think. I'm like, okay, Tam, you fucking set this up.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what, like, he knows. Like, rereading this is wild. Like, for the first time, it's wild because I'm like, he knows the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not fucking Mrs. Doubtfire of like the whole time, the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, my God. And like, I get he has to play into it. Like, he can't lie, or I'm sorry, he can't tell the truth. He has to lie to an extent, but he is really like, he is treating her like this wasn't a whole setup. Like, like she's this awful person.
Well, because he's still, oh God, it's happening. Because he's still battling. This is so funny. Oh my God. Only you would get me in this position. He's still, fuck. I'm like annoyed with myself as I'm talking.
I feel like you're his like defense attorney right now. You're like, God damn, I have the worst client.
Yeah, who got exactly, like I was assigned by the court to like defend him. Like, I don't really want to be here, but like here I am. It's my job.
Yeah.
That's a very fair point. You're totally right. And also, side note, I do mainly agree with you. Like,
I know you don't like
just
it.
to like put that out there, I do mainly agree with you. Like we talked about before, though, it's also the gray area of like he knows, but I also think that's why Tamlin ends up descending into this sort of place of like really intense self-hatred.
Yes,
because he fucks everything up, and I think he's very aware that he's sending his friends to die. I actually think it's brought up in one of the other books that like he's aware or like something, but like he's aware he is sending his friends to die. And that's actually why Andres was going to be the last one. So like this was going to be his last one. He wasn't going to send any more after this. And I think Andres even volunteered. Like I think we even find out later that it was like he was done. Because I think Feyre even gets kind of like mad at him for this almost. Yeah. And he's just like, I didn't want to do it. Andres volunteered and he left. And like, because I think it was one of those things where like he didn't even know I don't know. I don't remember. We'll get there. But
yeah,
I think Tamlin is in this really weird spot of like being very aware. I don't think he's aware of the selfishness because I think that's Tamlin's like biggest fault is him not being aware of his selfishness.
Yes.
But I think the murderer's moment is like, it's still shitty that his friend is dead. And
of course,
it still fucking sucks. And part of the curse is that she is supposed to hate him. Right?
That's a good point. And actually, It does. I'd kind of forgotten that. It does make me step back a few things I said, because a lot of what I do have to say, not a good chunk of it of what I have to say is like, he also has to make her fall in love with him. And so I'm like, you're not even fucking trying.
Well, and
But I forgot about that part.
Well, but I also think that like, because Lucien late in the I think in like the next chapter we're gonna get the like dinner that they all have together.
Yeah.
Right. And Lucien is like gonna be like poking her like, or like poking at him like, say something nice. Like it's very Beauty and the Beast when they first have their meal of like compliment her, like whatever.
Yeah.
Rereading it, I always took this beginning portion with Tamlin of him just like, it's not just, I think, this like kind of cute, awkward, like this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I think it's also this like, he's torn between this whole thing of just like, what, now I'm going to like force this girl to like fall in love with me while I had to systematically get my friends murdered just to get her over here. Like, I think there is a level of like, he's so angry at the whole experience. And
and that I can't blame him.
Yeah. And so I think it's like, I mean, again, I don't think the way Tamlin handles things is good, but I think there's just like, I'm going to sound like a fucking broken record, but it's all this gray area shit.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, how does anyone handle this? I mean, but it is funny though. When you brought up that whole portion in the beginning, I immediately thought of Rhys, and I was like, Rhys would have just married her instantly.
And I think that's the thing. And like, I know it's not necessarily fair to compare the two, but you also can't help it because like they are the two men we're comparing in the series, right?
How do you not? I don't know how we're not supposed to.
And I think, we talked about this in the spoiler half of last episode of like, Rhys is handed so many horrible fucking cards. I would argue more than Tamlin is, right? And not just in like since the Under the Mountain stuff began, but since before, right? Like Tamlin's family not only murders Rhys's family, but like decapitates his mother and sister. Like that is fucked.
It's really fucked
so
up.
Like, and so it's like, I don't know. It's just really hard to not compare.
And the
it's
wings.
like, oh my God, the wings and all that. And it's like, Rhys has done such a good job navigating just the most horrendous of circumstances.
Yeah.
And like, by all means, I'm not saying Tamlin is like given good circumstances at all. Like he's being forced to marry a monster, but like that's kind of the worst Tamlin gets. While at that same time, Rhys is being forced into sex slavery.
Yeah.
Like, come on. And I'm not telling like the Tamlin girlie is like, you have to be in love with Rhys. Like, you don't have to be in love with anyone, but it's just more of like, we need to like really take into consideration the cards that Tamlin's being dealt versus the cards that Rhys is being dealt and what they do with those cards.
Well,
respectively.
yeah. And also I think the other hard thing about Rhys's situation is that he's being a sex slave, but has to pretend that he loves being her right-hand man.
Meanwhile, Tamlin gets to live in the Spring Court with his
He gets to be home.
And the worst thing he deals with is his powers being like halved and having to wear a mask.
Yeah. So
that's not that bad.
I mean, it's funny because I've never thought about how the curse actually isn't that bad.
Especially when compared to what Rhys has to deal with.
Right. And so I'm being hesitant because I'm like, there's like a weird, this is so weird. There's like a weird part of me that hopes there's like some portion of the curse that we find out about that like makes it a little worse, honestly.
No, and
I'm just like, this is like, well, because you're really blowing my mind because the curse in my mind has always been like, it's fucking awful. Like this was the only choice. Right. There was no other option. This was the only way they could handle it because it's the only way, blah, blah, blah. And like, you're kind of showing this sort of like third path that it's like you bushwhacked some stuff away and showed me a third path that I'm just like, what the fuck? Has that always been there?
And look, maybe we'll get to, like you said, we'll get to later in the book and realize, oh, there was this whole thing we forgot about.
Yeah.
But at least from what I remember reading the first time, and like I even talked to David about it, and like just Googling, I'm pretty sure that's the extent of the curse. And what's really funny, actually, in chapter 4, something I noted is that, so Feyre, there's a quote in the book on page 34 that says, the fairy could have killed me, could have, yet the lunge had been a warning. Yeah. And I think this is the first time that Feyre is like kind of picking up on, hey, something's not right here. Like, obviously, she's not thinking like, oh, like there's a whole curse and this treaty is
Right.
bullshit. Like, that's not, she's not there by any means
Right.
yet. But she is questioning, like, why didn't he just kill me?
Yeah. She's like, yeah,
You know?
like that is something I noted down too, of like, that was the moment of, okay, he's not going to kill me.
Yeah.
But yet somehow but then a little bit later he says like, well, with the treaty, like, you know, you owe me your life. So yeah, there's already these very like conflicting moments.
The other thing I noted, not having to do with the treaty, just a quick side note, the part where she brings up that fairies can't lie.
Yeah.
First off, I wrote just LOL, LOL.
Yeah.
But then I wrote, my head canon is that Rhys is the one who started this rumor. In my heart, I'm like, I know like 500 years ago, Rhys just spread amongst the humans like, hey, so you know, we can't lie. Him or more. I could also see more being the one who spread that rumor. Just to create a little chaos.
I was gonna
and
say,
fun.
who would like very severely want to cause chaos in the human realm?
On like, if we're talking in a mean way.
In a mean way, I would. Who's Moore's dad?
Kier.
That fucker.
I could see
That would be the
Kier. I
one.
could also see like the King of Highburn saying
Totally.
Yeah. But if we're talking like in a funny, almost
funny
like
way,
Loki trickster sort of way, absolutely.
I feel like it'd be Rhys, and I feel like Cassian would be right behind him, just like.
Absolutely.
I have a 10-foot wiener, you know. Like, I feel like Cassian would just like say something really stupid.
Although we know he does. So.
I mean, so another thing that really kind of got me in chapter 4 from like a spoiler section was this moment with Nesta and Elaine. And Feyre has this moment where she again compares how Nesta looks to like her mom. How like she says like, you know, she like with these cold eyes and like cold eyes. But yeah, she like says how much she looks like her mother and like seeing her protect Elaine and like all this stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, Nesta has a moment in A Court of Silver Flames where she's talking to Feyre and she like brings up this moment of like when Tamlin first comes to the cabin and all of this, and like how the first thing she did was she left the cabin and looked for Feyre.
It may have not been the first thing, but it was like very
shortly after, and how like this was really kind of a crazy turning, slow beginnings of a turning point for Nesta, of the things that she carries guilt for that she ignores and tries to ignore for like a really long time.
Yes.
And I just, reading that moment again in chapter 4, I was just like, oh shit, Nesta, oh sweet baby girl. Like it's just really interesting because also I feel like Sarah J. Maas, she keeps describing like the placement of everyone in the cabin when this is happening, and like who's in front of whom and who's where and like all this stuff, and how like I think later Nesta even talks about how like all she really remembers was that was that her dad let this beast take her sister, and it was just like another thing that fucking Parpa Archeron just fucking failed at. And it's just like it's interesting. Sorry, I every now and then get sort of swept away with like the genius of Mama Maas, because this is totally a scene that very easily, all the thing that really is important that we take away from is that she gets taken by Tamlin.
Right.
But the fact that it is something that is brought up later, that is talked about from the trauma of another character, it's just so fucking real, dude. Like that is so real. You, as the older sister, see this shit happen. Yeah, it's going to stay with you. And I mean, it's a hard comparison because like you probably would have like slapped Ariana out of the way and like done a lot of fucking shit. But it's
also,
just like,
sorry, Ariana, even though she is shorter than me, is far stronger. she would have like shoved me into a closet and then beat the shit out of Tamlin.
Yeah.
So
Or get fucking mauled in the process, and I would jump through the window.
just like a fucking honing
Just
pigeon.
like would appear, would hear my two little babies like crying and be like beckoned like some mother, just like,
and I'd be in the closet like screaming, like, "Is that Corryn?"
yeah, how'd you get here? Yeah, I just I just think it's so cool how she doesn't do the kind of classic fantasy thing where like some of these moments or these stories are forgotten about and you just don't really, they're just things that happen and you just like don't really think about it again. Like she brings this stuff up later.
I think what is I'm realizing is so resonant, and I know every family has had moments like this. This is one of those landmark moments in a family where like everything changes. And I mean, and it's obvious because like literally one of the children gets kidnapped, but like every family has at least one, if not multiple moments in their family where like everyone looks back on and you're like, that is when the dynamic of the family changed.
Yeah.
And like, that's what it is for the Archerons, right? Like, obviously the first time was when Mama Archeron died, but I would say this is probably the second moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's really relatable. But yeah, no, like when Feyre tells Nesta, don't marry Thomas Mandre, like, I mean, I'd be really curious to know, like, I mean, it'd be a dream to talk to Mama Maas, right? But like, I think one of the first things I would ask her would be, did you always have the intention of writing a Nesta book, or did that come later? Because I just really would love to know if she like intentionally set it up, or if like there were just so many, like she's just so good at building a rich world anyway that she had enough to work off of when she decided to make a Nesta book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that, but the wisdom of Feyre, man. Like,
well, but like the thing that I think is really interesting is like we learn that Nesta has been sexually assaulted. I mean, I don't.
Well, that happened. That hasn't happened yet. Probably within this week that Feyre is in the Supreme Court.
But
that's when it happened.
But what I think is really interesting is we don't learn that in A Court of Silver Flames. We already know that going into that book. But the first time, I know. The first time that it's like very lightweight mentioned. Okay. Like we get the full story in A Court of Silver Flames, like 100%.
Right.
But it's lightweight mentioned. I think when the queens come to the house.
Yes. In Mist and
Fury. And there's some joke between Cassian and Nesta, and she says something that alludes to her being touched in a way that was unwanted. And Cassian fucking switches and is like, I will kill him. Or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first... I know. That's the first mention.
That.
And so that's what I think is really interesting is that, so that plan was already there. Not necessarily that Nesta was going to get a book, but the fact that that happened to Nesta, it was already in the canon. It was already involved. And I just think that's so interesting. And just like, because it's such a side throwaway. And for me, when I first read these books, the main thing I remembered was that Cassian switched and got defensive. I didn't really, which is also a kind of interesting that like her sexual assault didn't stick with me, but it is kind of like, I don't know. To me, it's like another one of those like Mama Maas moments where you're just like, damn girl, you had this fucking planned.
Well, and it just shows how she's so good. Like I feel like she really treats her characters like real people, right? Like she fleshes them out so well that like, let's say like she didn't have a plan for a Nesta book when she wrote Mist and Fury. Like she still gave this character this moment that added so much depth to her with by saying very little. Like you know exactly what it means. And also about Cassian too. Like how telling that is about his character, that he's like, oh, not only am I going to back off, but I want to murder the person who did this to you, right?
And that is what's so cool is that Cassian completely backs off. Like he like totally, and like you're so right. It's an incredible character moment for both of them. Because it's also kind of during a time where you're like still really hating on Nesta. And so it gives you this little moment of like, fuck. And then you also have this moment with Cassian where like, oh, he's not just like a fucking meathead. Like this is actually this guy who is like very, very tender and like has
Very
this
sensitive.
very sensitive and has this moment of, because even at that moment, you're still not quite like, he's flirting with her, but you're like, does he actually like her? Like, you can't fully tell yet.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he likes her or not. The fact is that she was touched in an unwanted way, and that's unacceptable. And
Yes.
it's very obvious that that's how he feels about it. So yeah, she create like, ugh, like how she manages. I mean, it's kind of a lot of like a show don't tell sort of moment of just like so much is happening, and I literally think it's like 3 lines in the book. Like
Yeah.
it's so fast, but very
Yep.
cool.
Speaking of shitty men, not Cassian, Thomas. I want to go back to the shitty man, Tamlin.
Okay.
Okay, so this is where I really began to just like, oh my God. So on page 37, he says, I have lands, I will grant you permission to live there, right? Now we know this is part of the whole, his plan to break the curse. But like, I don't know, like it just reminded me kind of, and like this is also knowing what he does later on, like all the things he gives her. It reminds me of a really toxic relationship where it's like it's the love, like he's not, I wouldn't say he's love bombing yet, but it's a like, I'm giving you these things. Like when she gets there, like look at these beautiful lands, right? Like look at these beautiful clothes. Like I'm granting you permission to live there. Like look at what I'm giving you. And it just I don't know. It seems benign, but like it's that thing of like, hindsight's 2020 of like when you realize like, oh, this person, I didn't ask for anything from this person. And they like, there was like a whole nother quote later. I forgot what it was exactly. You brought it up though.
You didn't have to mention the loophole. And he says, foolish of me to
Yes.
forget that humans have such low opinions of us. Do you humans no longer understand mercy?
Yes, it was that. I was like, he's negging her. He's absolutely negging her. Like, and maybe this is just because I've dealt with guys like this in the past of like, I'm being so nice to you and you're giving me nothing. And it's like, you're literally kidnapping her.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's why, again, and I know he's trying to break this curse, but then when we remember what the curse is actually about, she is a means to an end for you.
Yeah.
This is so gross.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, totally. I mean, I think it's a little cloudy because, no, I mean, I guess it's not. Because I was about to say, like, in this moment in time, he's just trying to be like, I'm not going to kill you, but you do have to come here.
Yeah.
And he's also trying to be like, but, you're not going to be like a prisoner. Like, I have lands you can live on, whatever the fuck, But I do keep forgetting that he knows. He knows what's supposed to happen in the curse the whole time. So, I mean, he does probably think like this will maybe like lessen the blow and make her starting to like me. And like, it is a little tricky when you start comparing something in this space, this fantasy space, to like real life shit, because we are dealing with the fact of like she killed his friend because he sent his friend out, but like
that's the thing.
Yeah, but like the friend is being killed, and he has to capture her. Humans and Fae do not like each other at all, yada yada yada. Like this is very different than just some dude picking you up at a bar and being like, look at all these drinks I bought you. Like it's very different. But I do understand the point that you're making in that it's like, I mean, I think if anything, it continues to show that while Feyre doesn't really know what love is, Tamlin doesn't either.
No, he doesn't.
He does not know how to navigate this, like, at all.
I think, when we look at, and you and I have talked about this before, when you look at Thorns and Roses, and especially by the time you get to Mist and Fury and you realize Tamlin's actually the bad guy in all of this, you realize that Thorns and Roses is a book about a girl who didn't really know what real love is. Or comfort, right? Or I guess at a certain point she did, but she was young, right? She was like, I think we figured out she was like 10 when they lost everything.
Yeah.
She doesn't really remember what like comfort is. Her family doesn't love her properly. So when she's given comfort and what she thinks is love, of course she's going to be like, hell yeah,
Yeah.
brother. Like,
Yeah.
of course I'm going to take this. Of course I'm going to love him until she finds out what real love is.
Yeah.
And one thing I found really fascinating during this reread, even though we're far from getting to Reese, by the time she gets to the spring court in chapter 6, you mentioned she's still trying to escape,
Yeah.
right? Like, even though her mind is starting to go like, is he my captor or is he my savior,
Yeah.
right? She's still trying to find a way to leave.
Yeah.
I think it's because her instincts are telling her, like, get the fuck out. Like, you don't want to be with this guy. Meanwhile, when she meets Reese for the first time at Calanmai, what is the first thing she thinks?
Yeah.
That's the most beautiful man I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And she's actually super comfortable around him.
Yeah.
And it's not until she's told who he is
That
and
she's
told all these rumors about him
Yeah.
that she's like, oh, I need to stay away from him. Whereas it's the opposite with Tamlin. Immediately her instincts are like, get the fuck away from me. But then when she's told, oh, he's great. Like at one point, Alice even says like something about like the mercy of our master, which we're going to talk about slavery and Tamlin's stance on it and how the fact that he has domestic servants. That's a whole thing I have. But like, he's painted by
Yeah.
his people as this wonderful guy. And that's why she believes, oh, he's actually the love of my life. Is like, he's the good guy, but he's not.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean that's actually a really good point because you're right. When she first meets Reese, yeah, I'd never thought about the fact that like she doesn't really dislike him until she's like told to, basically. The other thing that I do want us to remember is also at this point in the book, she's not looking at this guy as if she's supposed to fall in love with him.
No.
Right? Like she is purely coming in with this like, okay, is this a good guy or a bad guy? So when she's thinking, jailer or captor, she's not thinking like, villain or lover. She's thinking villain or friend.
Right.
Right? She's not in this space of like,
well, she uses the word savior. She does use the word savior.
Because I think the idea is that he'd be saving her from is the idea that he's saving her from the treaty or he's saving her from her destitution?
I think it's that. I think it is that.
Although
because that's a good question.
Yeah, because when she says the savior thing, I don't think she's quite aware of how cush his life is.
Yeah. No, there's a second time she says that, I think, when she's in the spring court.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it's a good point
right.
of like, which is she? And I kind of wonder if she's talking about
maybe
both.
both. And,
yeah.
But I feel like it's important to like remember that like, yeah, she doesn't start viewing him as like maybe someone she might kind of be into till I feel like maybe she like
he gets his fucking fiddle out. That's
well, no, I think it starts a little bit before that when she sits with that Fae who dies with his wings after they get cut off.
Yeah,
and
no, you're totally right.
Sees how Tamlin responds to it, and like I feel like that's when she starts softening to him, and when she starts kind of being like, I'm glad you brought that up because, like, look, as much as I'm going to hate on Tamlin, he does have some redeemable. I mean, if right now we're recording on March 12th, and like, if you've been on our socials, I just made a TikTok about the theory that Elaine actually might end up with Tamlin. Yeah.
So like, and he might get kind of like Nesta, and if you've read Throne of Glass, I won't say who, but a certain male character in Throne of Glass, Tamlin might get his own redemption story. And I am very open to that. Yeah. Like Mama Maas does a beautiful job with redemption arcs. Like
incredible.
Truly, I think one of the few authors where I'm like, you actually do it right.
It's wild how she's able to do it. Yeah.
All I'll say is Throne of Glass readers, I hated the character who she redeems in that series up until Tower of Dawn. Like hardcore hated
like literally, y'all, if I could show you the text messages. Hated him.
And now I think he's I won't say
he's okay.
You know what? No, I'm gonna say great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say he's pretty great.
No, he's good.
Irene redeemed him.
He just struggled. But anyway, no, I mean, I think like and you and I have talked about this before too, where like I don't actually hate Tamlin anymore. I just feel such a severe sense of pity for him. Which, you know, he makes a lot of real shitty decisions later that are clearly led by his fucking ego and his fucking penis. And like, it's just, there's so many decisions later that you're like, bro, are you 6? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I just feel such pity for this guy, because even like with you kind of mentioning like, okay, he has servants. Like, this is a dude who is brought up by a very particular style of High Lord.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that Rhys is like the weirdest High Lord ever.
But
right?
only because he hardcore rebelled. Because remember, his dad was worse than
Rhys's dad
Tamlin's dad.
Yes. So I mean, no, so I mean, there is very much like they are kind of these two sides of like, is it really nature versus nurture? Because they both were kind of brought up, but also Rhys's mom was like amazing.
That's true.
Yeah. So so there's sort of this like, but like I just think Tamlin to me is that pretty boy jock in high school who his dad was the reigning quarterback of the high school that his son now goes to. His dad is, maybe he's the coach now or something, like, or, you know, like his dad is basically trying to get his son to just copycat his footsteps.
Yeah.
And he's brought up in this kind of weird style of household where the kid kind of stays like stuck in time and doesn't really like grow and doesn't really know how to. And I just feel like that is Tamlin. Like, I feel like he kind of stopped mentally aging or I guess, sorry, like emotionally aging at a certain time.
Yeah. Probably when his
family was murdered. So it's like, it's kind of that weird thing where you don't forgive this person, but you feel like you have a sort of understanding of how they fell down this path, and you feel a certain level of pity for them.
I totally agree. And, you know, one thing I'm realizing, and again, like, I will just like give the full disclaimer, like, with this being my first reread, like, it is personally for me on like a very individual level, like, it's very triggering because, like, all I'll say is, like, I've been in, and I think this is specifically why, like, I've been in a relationship where that person manufactured and manipulated so many circumstances in a similar way, obviously not as extreme, but in a very similar way that Tamlin is doing with Feyre to get me to fall in love with.
And it makes complete sense because there is a level of this here that it makes so much sense that this is like extra triggering for you. Like, I have not experienced this in a romantic relationship. I've had this done to me by other people in my life that I don't want to talk about at all. It makes so much sense that there is a level here that I won't be able to go down with you because of this romantic experience that you have had. And so, like, it makes complete sense. And also, Ariel, I got to this place of pitying Tamlin because I've read it 4 times.
Well, but you know I was so glad you brought the pitting thing because, like, it immediately made me go, I've not forgiven that person.
No.
Well, actually, no, I did. And then I realized he was lying. And then I'm like, I take it all back. Probably never will forgive this person, but I pity him. Because similar to Tamlin, he does have some really bad things that have happened to him in his past. And I think that's why I love this series so much is Sarah J. Maas. I kind of think that's one of the themes of this book, honestly, is you don't have to forgive. And this especially comes up in Silver Flames, right? Like, you don't have to forgive to move on. You can, and I can go on for a million years about this bullshit concept that I think in large part is due to religion, to be honest, of like, you have to forgive to forget. That's bullshit. I'm telling you now, listeners, you don't. Like, you can move on. The person you need to forgive is yourself.
Exactly.
That's where forgiveness comes in.
That's where it is. That's where the forgiveness comes in.
Exactly. And that's what Nesta does. That's what Feyre does. Like, that's where forgiveness comes in. But you don't have to forgive. And at the same time, you can simultaneously understand why the person who did you dirty is coming from. You can understand all the reasons they did it, but it doesn't mean you have to forgive them. No. And I think Feyre does that so well in probably by, I would say, definitely by Frost and Starlight, maybe in Akawar. But yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the
Yeah,
tweet
I mean, I literally just told you I couldn't even read any of the Tamlin stuff. This
Right.
my first reread. So like
Yeah.
I completely understand where you're at right now.
I think there's a good case, especially if we do end up, and this is all theory at this point, but if we do end up getting a Tamlin redemption book, or even just storyline, which I think at the very least we're going to get a redemption storyline,
Yeah.
even if he doesn't get his own book. But no, I think there is merit in exploring, the other being the devil's advocate.
Mhm. And what's really funny too is I feel like during this section, I was like, "Boo, your family's gonna be
I
fine.
know, but
Tamlin's
she
gonna
doesn't
give
know
them a
yet.
bunch of money. Everything's gonna be just fine."
And that is one thing I'll give in Tamlin's,
Yeah,
I'll give
yeah,
a point to
yeah.
Tamlin for is like he
He
does
does.
take care of her
Which
family.
is like really, really, I think it's like one of the few things that I'm just like, you can't, there's nothing to fault for that. Like even
Right.
him taking away their memory was actually kind of a gift because it
Yeah.
was protecting them from not like going out,
Yeah. It's just very interesting now knowing that he knows.
Yeah.
He knows
No, it
everything.
totally, I feel like, I don't feel like I've ever read it that way with that
Yeah.
realization of just, he knows all the steps. What's really fucking weird is it puts me in this place of like, fucking Tamlin, dude, bro, come on, man.
Well, and I think this is what makes him such a good, I'm not going to call him a villain because I don't
No,
think he's a villain. Like villains are like Amarantha and the King Highborn,
yeah,
but he is a bad
he's a
guy.
bad guy.
And I think, putting my screenwriting cap on, one of the best lessons I've ever been taught was actually in my very first screenwriting class I took in high school. I did like a summer program at the Academy of Art. I unfortunately don't remember the professor's name, but what's so sad is he used my favorite movie as an example. He was talking about writing really good antagonists. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, you always want to have some human element to your antagonist. And he gave the example of a badly written antagonist, and it was Titanic, which is my favorite movie. And he said, yeah, I'm sorry, but like Rose's fiance Cal is not a well written antagonist because like he's pure evil.
Yeah,
There's nothing redeemable or good about
yeah,
that guy. And I'm like, ugh, I hate to say it, but you're right. And I think that's why Tamlin is such a well written antagonist because there is a lot of humanity in him. You understand his family was murdered. He had all this responsibility placed on him. He was put under this curse that he didn't want to be put under. Like
yeah,
he does have obligations to help his people who are under this curse, even though it's not, again, the worst thing in the world, but
mm-hmm.
it's still, they have to wear all these masks, right? Like there are consequences that he is responsible for. And then even when he fucking crashes out after Rhys and Feyre get together, like there's moments I did really pity the
Yeah,
guy, like especially in I think it's Frost and Starlight when Rhys goes to the spring court and is like goading him. I'm like, look, I love you, Rhys, but like you're kind of being an
yeah, you're
asshole.
being an
Like
asshole.
you don't need to go that hard. So I
Leave him
think like
alone.
there's a lot of merit to like defending him somewhat.
Somewhat, but I think, well,
Yeah.
because I also think that what's really interesting is that she gives us this troubled soul on the side of the good guys, which
Yeah.
he kind of swings back and forth. Fucking idiot. I mean, honestly, like that is a lot of where Tamlin lost me when like
Oh,
turns
the sisters
everybody
in.
into Highburn. Although it does
Yeah.
make it seem like he didn't know the like what was gonna happen. Anyway, that is like a little bit where he lost me, but I feel like he kind of starts redeeming himself, and then you fucking lose him again, and then he's just sort of like a beast in the woods, and you're like, okay, fuck off.
I think what Tamlin is kind of supposed to be in the grander scheme of ACOTAR is, especially since we know she's making allegories to the Civil War, is like there's a lot of, whether we're talking about the Civil War or like other just points in history, current times now, there's a lot of well-meaning
Yes,
people out there
yes,
who unknowingly do bad things, or like their non-action is, it ends up aiding and abetting the bad guys, right? And that's the precise position that Tamlin's in.
Oh my God. Thank you, Ariel. That is 100% what I was trying to get to, and it was not fucking happening for me. Oh my God. From my little scattered brain to your eloquently put together mouth. Thank you. Wow. Yes. 100%.
And I think that's why I have really complicated, like, it's almost easier for me to hate on Tamlin than it is to hate on like Amarantha or the King of Hybern, because I'm like, well, you're just evil. Of course you're gonna do that. Whereas with Tamlin, I'm like, you could have done the
Yes.
right thing.
Yes.
How didn't you see it?
Well, and that I think that's an incredible point to bring up, is that it hurts more when it's the people who like have the opportunity, they have the means. Yeah. Like I think that is why Tamlin feels like such a thorn in the side, because you're
The Court of Thorns.
I literally
But-
didn't mean to do that. I'm just
so
I'm just
sorry.
naturally punny, you guys. It just happens so naturally. But no, I mean, I do think that is why he is like so extra infuriating. You know, it's kind of like Obi-Wan and fucking Anakin. Like, you are the chosen one. You are my brother.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, bro, you fucking could have, and you were weak and small.
Yes.
And once you got what you want, you stop trying.
Yes.
And that's not really how life works. The one thing that I did want to bring up was that when they say 7 High Lords, beings of such unyielding power that legend claimed they could level buildings, break apart armies, and butcher you before you could blink. I immediately thought of our sweet baby boy Rhysand and his fucking mist shit thing that he can do. And I was like, oh my God, they tell us about Rhys's power like so early. Like, what the
And
fuck?
it's so scary, but also so hot.
It's so hot.
Like-
Oh my God. The first time the mist happens. But yeah, I loved that little moment where I was like, there he is. There's our little boy. Look at him just being all talked about.
Well, also, not just Rhys, Cassian too,
know.
because the level building, because the summer court.
Yeah,
That's why he's
he's not allowed to go, because he completely destroyed a building, like fucking.
Which do we
I love
ever
him so
find out
much.
why?
No, we never. I
have a theory.
I don't think we ever. Oh no, wait. Was he sleeping with someone he wasn't supposed to be?
That was gonna be my theory. I'm like, he totally was fucking someone. That's why he leveled the building.
Why do I have a memory now of him saying like, "Oh yeah, her husband came home"?
Does that
sound
you might
familiar?
be right. That kind of does. I mean, I was gonna joke he was probably fucking someone, so it probably that probably was it.
Very on brand for fucking Cassian.
I mean, also makes you think like, how the fuck is the House of Wind still standing at the end of Silverblade?
Dude, because it's fucking like carved into the mountain. House of Wind
That's
is
true.
basically the mountain. That's why it doesn't break, bro. When everyone's having this crazy fucking
Wow.
sex. Think about
Yeah.
Nesta's nightmare when she's like floating in silver and fucking scary and shit and like blowing out the windows. The
Yeah.
rooms are fine because they're made out of fucking stone.
Wow, that is truly the only place they could live.
No, that's the only place that Nesta and Cassian could live, because they would destroy everything else.
I kind of hope they never have kids, because like, that's just gonna put a damper on their sex life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let them just fuck for all eternity.
I mean,
please.
like, I'm kind of here for that, you know? Like, I don't need her. It would actually be really cool as an author to not have every single couple have kids.
Right? I just picture Nesta as like the cunty aunt
Yes.
who like just spoils her nieces and nephews, and like, but doesn't, and it's because she doesn't have kids of her own.
She's like
And
a
like,
fucking bulldog
Cassian's-
to everybody else.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And then Cassian's like the fun uncle, and they'll babysit, right? But then they're like, at the end of the day, like, we get to give you back. We get to give you back, thank God. And then they just like go fuck each other's brains out in the House of Wind. And the poor house has to watch. And then Azrael comes in for breakfast the next morning and is like, God, I know what you did on this.
Dude, why does that like lightweight sound like me though?
Because it is. What do you mean? Why does it sound like me? It's literally your
Like
life.
literally like spoils nieces and nephews, fucking bulldog to everybody else, and then is like deuces.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Chapter 6.
So the part where Feyre's like, No sign of dungeons, no shouts or pleas rising up from hidden chambers below. I know we touched on this in the last, or the non-spoiler episode. I think what's so interesting about this, because she brings up this idea of like she thinks she's going to some dungeon a couple times,
Yeah.
right? And then she's shocked to hell when she's in this beautiful spring manor until you realize, and obviously you don't realize this until Mist and Fury,
Ooh,
it is a dungeon.
it is. It's her cage.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought the word cage because I wrote a little Taylor Swift lyric because it's me. Taylor Swift has a song called "So It Goes," which, yes, I'm pretty sure it's a Kurt Vonnegut reference, off of Reputation, where she says "gold cage hostage to my feelings," and that's Feyre. She's like in this gilded cage, basically, without even realizing it for an entire book.
Yeah.
And it's not really until like, I mean, maybe a little before this, but like the moment in Mist and Fury where she like spreads out the darkness and war comes to rescue her, it's like, oh no, this has been a dungeon the whole time for her. It's just a beautiful looking dungeon. And I think like that's what's just so insidious about it, right?
Totally.
Like it's you know, I can't remember if we talked about this on the last episode for last week or if we like just talked about it, you and me, but like ACOTAR, Thorns and Roses very much feels like that story that I think a lot of women go through, and some men, I'm sure too, of like you get into this very comfortable relationship, you think you have everything you want, and then you realize, oh, this actually isn't what I want. Comfort is not what I want. I want adventures. I want excitement, and that's the real dungeon that Feyre is put into. And I think that's so sad because like there's probably a level of responsibility she feels. And to be fair, you know, it does fall on her somewhat. But it's like it's this like it's almost a self-betrayal. Right? Like you kind of betrayed yourself.
Yeah.
But still fucked you.
Yeah, no.
Because
That's so fascinating though, because like it is funny because she does mention it so much that she's like, oh, I'm not going to a cell. I'm going to a room. But we all know later that room completely turns into her cell. She feels suffocated. She feels like she can't breathe. Like she's like, you know, and it's so interesting how I feel what's really weird is I feel like Tamlin doesn't make the house a prison until the second book. Like I think right now he is very like kind of trying, well, like, I mean, yes, he wants her to sort of stay in certain areas, but he does start like opening up certain stuff to her. And he does, and honestly, most of the time he doesn't want her to leave like the garden, more out of protection because of all the scary creatures that are outside. When he is a character where we sort of view him as a captor, he actually isn't doing it as much as he is when he turns into her lover. And like that's fucking terrifying. And I mean, yeah, it's just interesting. I just didn't realize how much like foreshadowing there was.
There's a quote on page 51 where he literally tells her, I'm not your jailer. The gates are open. You can live anywhere in Prithian, right? This is where it starts to feel really manipulative to me. You see this in toxic relationships in real life of like, oh, you can leave whenever you want. No, she can't.
Yeah.
He knows she can't because she'll be killed she'll die,
really
right?
Good point.
Yeah, he's saying, yeah, you can go out, you can do all these things while she's still a human, but he knows. The only reason he's saying that is he knows she can't. Whereas when she becomes a fae,
when she's actually powerful enough to protect herself, oh my god.
He's like, you're staying here. You can't even go into the village unless I say so.
Oh my god.
Like that's what I'm talking about in terms of Tamlin is a toxic partner. Tamlin. I know, and I hate it, but like I also love it because she's making such good commentary, right?
She is.
Whereas Rhys, you know, so this actually brings me to another point that gets brought up earlier in the chapter. So going back to like when he's talking about the food, or she's talking about the food, right? Like when she's like, you know, we were taught as children, you'll be bound to the fae if we eat their food. It's funny to me, kind of like the dungeon thing, right? even though the food isn't enchanted, the food still binds her to Tamlin
Yeah, because she needs to be fed.
because she needs to be fed, because it's the stability and the
Yeah.
luxury that binds him to Tamlin. And I had to ask myself at that point in the chapter, without those two things, stability, or even just stability, like fuck the luxury, let's just talk about the
Yeah.
stability. Without the stability, would she have even entertained falling in love with Tamlin?
No.
And I don't think she would.
No, not at all.
No,
No.
no.
100% could say no to that, because really what she fell in love with Tamlin was just the peace she was able to have. She
Yeah.
felt safe. She was actually able to like party. What? That's not a concept for her.
Oh,
So no, absolutely not. If he could not have provided all of that, I do not think she would have even remotely fallen in love with him.
entertained it.
Well, just because they even talk about how like later in the book, and this is another one of like the red flags that I'm just like, how did I not? They talk kinda, but like
Kinda.
not like they're not like they're kind of friends, sorta. But when you just really think about the conversations and stuff that they have, like it's so much more of a like attraction thing. And obviously like I'll save some of these nuggets for later, but like they don't even really describe the sex as that good.
No. Yeah, from what I remember, like I remember reading the beginning of, because like I think Mist and Fury is like the only book where we get Spice like very like
In
in
the
one of the
beginning.
first
Yeah,
chapters.
yeah.
And I remember being like, why am I not getting turned on by this?
Well, you're almost, and like I remember being disappointed because
Yeah,
I was like, wait a minute, like they're finally like together and happy. Like, why are we not getting like some really fucking awesome, like I don't
they're
even
literally
yeah, like
engaged.
I don't like, I'm not saying kinky. I mean like
Right.
beautiful love making of like,
Yes.
goosebumps and some shivers down your spine. Like I want some like sweet, sweet baby making, and like we did not get
Yeah.
that. And I just remember that was one
No.
of my first moments of like,
Hmm.
is this writer just not that good? But if she's not that good, then why does everyone love this series so much? And then I was like, oh no, what's gonna happen?
Oh.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was just thinking, so like, again, listeners, you're listening to this way in the future, but like right now it's March and the Oscars just happened. And if you watched or paid any attention, the movie Anora just won a bunch of awards. If you've seen Anora, it kind of reminds me of Anora. Basically, it's a movie about a sex worker in New York. She works at a strip club and she ends up kind of being assigned to this like young Russian kid because she's the only girl in the club who can speak Russian. And he basically hires her to be his girlfriend for the week. And then they like fall in love, right? I say in quotes. And the whole point of the movie is she only falls in love with him because he provides her with stability,
Yeah.
right? And it just reminds me so much of what's going on, obviously in a very different way, in this book of like, without that stability, Tamlin's a dud.
I mean, kinda. And I think unfortunately it kind of highlights some relationships that I think a lot of people get stuck in of
Yeah.
like, these women, and I'm specifically talking about a female experience because that's what I am closer to.
Yes.
So, I don't want to be leaving out like all of our other humans, but from my whatever, we have all these stories of these women who wake up at 40 and are like, what the fuck? And
Yeah.
they realize that they are not with someone who sees them, who knows them.
There's a lot of that going on right now, especially
Yeah.
because of like the
All
current
the
political
shit. Yeah.
climate.
So
Yeah.
I think that's also why sometimes this situation with Tamlin, I think for some people could potentially be really uncomfortable because it
Yeah.
might be pinpointing some stuff for them. But yeah, I think she's touching on so much here of real experiences that are like happening for people, but like put in this like really wild fantasy world. In chapter 6, there's like there's like a moment with Lucien. He says, she brought Andres down. We never should have sent him out there. None of them should have been out there. It was a fool's mission. Maybe we should just take a stand. Maybe it's time to say enough. Dump the girl somewhere, kill her. I don't care. She's nothing but a burden here. She'd sooner put a knife in your back than talk to you or any of us. And then Tamlin says, no, not until we know for certain that there is no other way will we make a move. And as for the girl, she stays unharmed. End of discussion. And there's one more where where Lucien, yeah, he's like, and now we're stuck with that thanks to your useless mercy, and you've ruined something.
Yes. Yeah.
So like there's some little, I don't think I ever realized how like there's these moments with Lucien that he like gets so close to like saying some of the things about the curse like out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fun. Again, I'm going to say this a lot. It's so funny rereading it because it's so in your face now. Like once you know it, you can't unsee it, right?
And it also makes me love Lucien more because he's basically like, we shouldn't have sent any of them out there. Like we should stand up for ourselves is basically what he's saying. And it's like, I forgot that Lucien was already kind of like the troublemaker for Tamlin of just like, this is fucking stupid. Let's fucking raise our army and fucking stab some people. Like I just feel like Lucien is just like, let's cause a riot, let's do it, you know.
Well, and it makes so much sense to be Lucien because like he's kind of already done that with his own family.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, like this is I will say at this point where I'm at with Lucien, I don't 1,000% trust Lucien because like I think I'm going a little too far down the road of like, what if Elaine is not actually Lucien's mate and Tamlin actually is?
Yeah.
Like, but it's not, I'm not saying I love Lucien. It's just more of like, I don't know if Lucien is always 100% honest.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
And I think his mask being a fox is a huge hint to that. Right?
Yes.
Foxes are sneaky. Doesn't mean I fucking love foxes.
Love foxes.
Doesn't mean they're bad.
No.
But I'm suspicious of Lucien, but in like a fun little like, what are you up to kind of way, you know?
And where you're just kind of like, hey friend, what little secrets are you trying to hide right now? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And like I can't remember if this was a theory either we talked about or I saw somewhere or I thought of. It's this idea of like, let's say Tamlin is actually Elaine's mate and no one from the Night Court was about to let Elaine go home with Tamlin.
Oh, so yeah, Lucien, you and I talked about this. Yeah.
Lucien might have stepped in and been like, oh, I'm her mate as a way to cover for his boy.
Yeah.
And then kind of get some intel for Tamlin from the Night Court.
I am a part of the camp that actually believes that Lucien isn't truly her mate and that he did it to save Tamlin.
Yeah. Same.
I, however, am not of the camp where I think that he is spying on the Night Court. I think that he purely did it because he knew what they were going to do. Like he knew that they were never going to let Elaine see Tamlin like ever.
I think that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like not necessarily spying on the Night Court to like do some nefarious things. I think more like keep tabs on Elaine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like there's no way Tamlin would have been allowed.
Yeah. And I think part of like when we see Lucien and they're like, oh, Feyre talks about how like he looks like he's in so much pain anytime he's like near Elaine. I think it's more him just like being really sad of like, how am I ever gonna be able to like get Elaine and Tamlin together with all of the fucking choices that Tamlin is making? Because we also find out that like Lucien has been like trying to go back to the Spring Court to like talk to Tamlin, and Tamlin is like not seeing him. And we have to remember that like Lucien escaped his family and went to the Spring Court. Like Tamlin was his safe place. So like, that's why there's that certain amount of like loyalty there. And like, so yeah, I'm definitely of the camp there.
There's also theories that I've seen sprinkled about that, remember, Tamlin's a shapeshifter. So in theory, sometimes that might be Tamlin and not Lucien. I think it's, if it is true that Tamlin's her mate and yada, 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 I think it's at least possible.
But see, this whole thing about like Tamlin being like a shapeshifter, all the High Lords can shapeshift into a beast. All of them can. Okay.
Right. But I think the difference, didn't we figure out the difference is Tamlin can shift into other forms as well?
What, where, when?
That's true.
Like that's my biggest thing is that I'm like,
Yeah.
how do we have any information that Tamlin can turn into anything besides this beast form?
I think the idea is his specific like
Power.
thing is shapeshifting. So if everyone else can shapeshift, he must have some additional power.
See, I think people just got stuck on the fact that when Feyre, when she first meets Tamlin, like in this moment, she keeps calling him a shapeshifter because he can shift
Right.
into beast form. But then he proceeds to meet all these other high lords. Like this is before she's like educated about the Fae. So like I just wonder if people got stuck on that vocabulary.
No, because when Feyre, remember when she gets all her gifts from the High Lords, her gift from Tamlin is she can shape shift partially. That's how she's able to grow the Illyrian wings. That comes from Tamlin.
Oh, that comes from Tamlin.
I think that
Oh.
there's going to be a big reveal about Tamlin's shapeshifting abilities in either the next book or a future book. And I think Mama Maas has very specifically kept some things secret because she's going to like blow our minds with something, whether it's like Lucien has been Tamlin the whole time or part of the time or something else. I think that there's something we don't know about Tamlin and his shapeshifting abilities yet that we're gonna like have our minds blown by in some book.
Holy shit. Sorry, I forgot about. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
She can
No, they
shapeshift
talk
because
about
of
it.
Tamlin. All right. Well, there you go. Look at that. Edumacated. You just educated me.
And on that note, I think we covered
I
it.
think we covered it.
If you listened to the last episode, which hopefully you have, you know that your homework is chapters 7 through 10, which we can say it here because you've read this book before. It gets us all the way up to Feyre seeing Papa Archeron,
Yep.
quote unquote, in the garden. So that's going to be really fun to take a look at.
Yeah.
Look, like I said, I know I'm on the Tamlin hate train right now, but like I do, you made some really good points. I can't promise I'll give him a ton of slack, but I'll give him little bits of slack, you know?
Well, and in turn, I will also remember that this is your second read. And it's a very different headspace. I've had a lot of time to get to this point with him.
Yes.
So
you've had years.
I've had years. So while you are working on that, I will work on that on my end of also just remembering how much I fucking hated Tamlin for not that long, but like a while. So I just I will also make sure that I will just let you have that rage because it's a canon event, you know. So
it's a canon. I saw a TikTok of I can't remember if I sent it to you, but it was a girl who just was about to begin Silver Flames, and she was like bitching about it, being like, "I hate Nesta. I can't believe I have to read a whole book about her." And like one of the top comments was like, "It's a canon event. We mustn't interfere."
We mustn't interfere.
Because like I feel that.
Well, because it's so true. It is totally part of the process. Like you have to hate Nesta when you or heavily dislike her when you start that book. That is literally part of the process. So
it's designed that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love you.
I love you.
I'm so glad we got to debate about Tamlin and we'll get to continue.
Jesus.
It's so fun. But yeah, we'll see you, lovely listeners, next week.
You're welcome.
And we're sorry. Bye.
Bye.